So this is what we got going on this week. We're building on the boat. We're going to go ahead and put on another layer here, a guide coat on top of our finish primer from last deal. We're going to sand that back with 320 grit to get it ready. We're going to give this old girl a bath. She's kind of dirty and dusty, so we're going to make her look pretty here. And then eventually, you see it here first, we put in some color. You saw some color going on it right there. But this is it. We're building a Salt Boatworks Flats River Skiff 18, a FRS 18, and we've built this thing from the start. You can see the project from the start. There's a playlist. We'll put you a link up right here. You just click on that link and it'll take you, and you can watch it from the time we started cutting out the plywood from the paper plans. But so far this week, what we got is we've put that finish primer on last time. So here it is. I've got some 220 on this random orbital sander. And with this 220, I'm just kind of knocking the tops off of that eggshell, just kind of giving it a little rough sand. Not really trying to get it super smooth, but just trying to, take a little bite out of it. So when we come back with this 320 to make it really smooth, it's not as difficult. This is a little trick I learned from Frankie Bichon. I think I finally said his name right. But I'll put a link right here or a picture. You can see his deal, his channel. He's got a lot of boat projects and painting and stuff. He's a painter, I think, in Virginia. Very informative. But you can see here I'm just working around those strakes and along those chines, trying to sand this stuff by hand. You can see a little bit of bleed through right there around that bow eye. But I'm going to talk about that here in a little while. But by and large, right now, we just, like I said, continuing to hit this finish primer. This is, I think, 3 coats of finish primer that we put on last week or last video. And once again, still just roughing it up. As soon as I rough it up, we're going to come back and put that guide coat on. But, running through this stuff in time lapse, because it's not the most exciting thing, but you can see systematically how I'm approaching sanding this stuff. And I'm hoping that, by doing that, it ensures me that I hit everything and I'm pretty thorough and I don't miss anything. I don't have any spots. But once again, we're going to be coming back with the 320. So you saw me hand sanding, so I went around all the strakes and the chines and all and kind of hand sanded to make it easier when I hit it with that random orbital. Here it is, just putting that guide coat down. And this guide coat, once again, it's like a real fine powder. I think this is a Duragold product. Alright, well, you saw in the video from yesterday, sanded the whole boat down with 220 and hand sanded all the little fine areas and stuff like that. So I just wanted to kind of knock that rough orange peel down with the 220. Now I put on this guide coat, which you saw that too. Now on top of that guide coat, we're going to come back with some 320 and I'm going to do my hand sanding first, so that when I get with the random orbital, that I can just go right up against where I hand sanded it, and so I can keep from a couple of areas. I think I got a little too close with that 220, and I kind of got I bled through the finish primer, so I'm gonna have to figure out, I might have to come back and recoat that and come back and sand it again. Gotta do some research on that, but I think that's what I'm gonna have to do before I go to top coat. Even if I go the other way and just leave it like it is, I don't think it'll be a huge deal, but I want to do it right, if I come this far. So right now I just got a little piece of pipe insulation here, and I got a little piece of 320, and I'm gonna go through here and hand sand in some of these areas. I'm gonna try and show a little more detail of that, what it looks like, and maybe see what the coating looks like. But we're gonna, the plan is from here is to hit all this with 320. Hopefully all the guide coat goes away, but if it does reveal some areas we have to deal with, we'll deal with those. And we'll do a real fine walk through, put a fine eye on everything, and fix anything that I need to. I do know there's a couple little bitty holes, little spots, maybe pinholes, that may be what they are. Got a couple of those I have to finish and fix before we go to top coat. But right now I'm going to show a little bit of this, and then we'll put it on time lapse as we go forward. So as I talked about it, just have that little pipe insulation, have a piece of sandpaper wrapped around it here, and I'm trying to use that to sand the sides of these strakes here. And you can see it leaves a little gutter right there in the middle, so we're going to come back and address that right here. I'm going to try and take this 320 sandpaper and use this little sanding sponge, but this is only this is a 220 grit, so I got to be careful to make sure that I keep a firm edge there and don't get to sanding with the 220 too much. So I'm hoping by using that's a sanding sponge, but that sponge it's pretty firm. So by putting that 320 on it, I'm hoping I can get in that corner right there, because that pipe insulation was leaving that right in the very corner. It's still pretty rough, and so I'm really working on it. But you can see here, especially with the guide coat, how I'm trying to sand around these streaks right here, so when I come back with the random orbital sander, I don't have to worry about getting all the way up against those streaks, and it just seems to work out a whole lot better. And then, on these chines, these things have been a labor of love, or whatever the opposite of that is sometimes, because I've worked on them and worked on them, and I think they're going to turn out just fine. But you can see I'm just same thing, taking that sanding sponge and wrapping that 320 around it. One thing that I've noticed with this finish primer is that it really wants to clog up that sandpaper, so I wound up getting my brush and I was cleaning it out pretty regular. Alright, there. So as a whole, you can see I went ahead and did all my hand sanding here along the chines, along these streaks. So now all I have to do is take my random orbital 320 and we're going to hit this guide coat, but I wanted to show it before I attacked it. So this is what it looks like beforehand. Hopefully you can see that, but it's smooth, but you can see how that the whiter parts are where the orange peel, the top of the orange peel that the 220 took off, and the bottom is actually where the surface and the, you should call it the substrate or whatever. So I'm gonna kind of show this hopefully, and then we'll video it and then come back and show you again what it looks like, and then how you can identify issues. So now you got a before picture here. So we're going to focus on this little area right here on the transom. Alright, so that's a little trick that I learned from Izzy Swan. He's another guy on YouTube, big woodworker. He he did a segment on sandpaper. You may be able to find it, but if you put a line on your random orbital sander, you should always see that line spinning. If the line's not spinning, then you're putting too much downward pressure on it. And so you can see that I'm having to kind of finagle and lift that hose to keep that sander flat. So now hopefully you can see that all that's perfectly good, and we did kind of get through the primer a little bit here, and maybe just a touch there, trying to work on this edge right here. There's still, you can see, I hope you can see, like there's where the guide coat, where you can still see that dark, like it's smooth, but it's not perfectly smooth. So I'm gonna have to get my hand sander, my little foam pad, and come back and maybe hit this again if I want to try and make it look absolutely perfect. But so that's what it looks like, and then you can see this looks really good. Like this is what we're looking for. So I'm gonna keep at it, hit the rest of the boat here. So you could see up against that straight right there, like I'm working, it has that little bit right there in the corner where it's just still got a little bit of texture to it. But we're going to come back and address that. But what I'm talking about with this guide coat, what we're wanting to see is you want to be able to, once you come in there and you start sanding it, that all of that guide coat goes away. And that's the whole purpose of it, is that it gives you an idea, and you can see the little bitty spots where you have where you need to sand some more. It makes it really easy to know what you're sanding. And I know I'm running through it pretty fast here because I've covered this in the past, but that guide coat doesn't always, it tells you the truth, and it doesn't always make you feel good. But right now, this far along in the project, and as much as we've sanded on this thing, You know, sanding it like this and making it go away it's a good feeling for sure. So you could kind of see there a little bit. I should have never put that random orbital sander on top of those strakes, and I kind of worked it because that thing has that soft sponge on the bottom of it. It kind of worked on those corners a little bit more than what I would have liked. So we're gonna make an adjustment going forward. Well, so here we are, kind of the next day, a couple days later, whatever. And now what we're gonna have to focus on is we got these few little areas here as we were sanding it. We kind of sanded down, and I still think there's some primer over this or some high build, but because I can see that fairing compound, I'm a little concerned about that. So what I'm gonna probably come in here and do is section off a little piece here, sand it back with 120, and then put a new coat of finished primer on it, and then come back and sand it, because I'd like to have a good primer coating. I mean, you can see, you know, there's another little spot right here where it just looks a little discolored, but I still think there's primer on that one. Let me go around here. You know, like here's a spot where, you know, maybe there's some primer on that, but man, if I can just take this and sand out a little spot, put another bit of primer on it and sand it back before I get the top coat, I think we're gonna be better off. But as you can see, all of this sanded back. There's a couple little spots in here, like right here. I don't know if you can see this, where, you know, it looks just, you know, it's got, I think that's actually the underside where you can see up underneath there where we filled up some of that stuff. But you know, I think there's still primer and all on that, so I'm not as concerned with that. But I may just go ahead and hit this, you know, kind of hit this whole area, like right here on this keel front, is maybe, or not the keel, but on the entry, the bow entry. You can see a little bit of fairing compound there, and I'd kind of like I said, I'd like to have full coverage on primer. You know, I've got some spots here along the chine. You know, I have worked on these chines and worked on them, but like, I don't want that to be any problem or anything for the paint. And that's primarily where my problems are. Like, this has probably got a little coverage on it, but overall, the first coat, you know, the first coat's the finished primer, 3 coats, it went on fantastic, and it's sanded back exceptionally smooth. This is all 320. You can see, you know, same thing on these strakes here. There's a little bit where you could see kind of sanding on those edges. You really have to do those by hand. And so what I may do, like I said, is rough them up, put a couple more coats on these, and then just hand sand that. But there are some places, you know, like this, I feel good about all this. That's okay, I think. But I'm mainly worried about these areas right in here where you can really see through. But it is super smooth, and it's gonna be nice to get some finished paint on. It's kind of like the last project, a little bit here at the end. This is where I showed you where I put that guide coat on it, and I came back and sanded it back. But there was a little bit of stuff right here on the back that just couldn't get rid of that texture. And so I just kept working it, which I feel like, you know, that's a learning thing. That's what I should have been doing even with the high build primer, is getting it back to smooth like this. But now, like I said, come back in here, rough this up while I'm doing these strakes, and I think that's gonna be good. It's just a few little bitty things before we go to top coat here. You know, another little spot down through here along these chines. That transition right in here, it's just tough, but I feel like I've got the right tool to sand it and all now. You know, can use that sponge and stuff to work in there. And once again, you know, I just learned that I kind of got to get in here and hand sand these with and kind of be a little gentle with it, to be honest with you. So that, you know, you got those edges there, they're just so easy to burn through. And as I was using that orbital on there, I think that's what happened. But Go make an adjustment, and you can see like the rest of this side, you know, man, it just looks fantastic. And it is, you know, it is super smooth. It's super dusty right now, but so I'm gonna mark off a couple of those areas, give that a shot, and then we're gonna get ready. You know, I got to put that on, got to mix the paint, put it on, let it cure, and then come back and sand it back. And then man, I'm hoping we're gonna be getting the top coat. Just gonna give you a little piece of it here. All I'm doing is I've got a 120 grit pad and some paper, and we're just preparing to put down that some more finish primer here. And then I take my little pencil and I'm marking so I know exactly when I go to start painting what areas that I want to paint. So that's what all those lines right there are for. See, I got my Scotch-Brite pad in. This is like a 320 grit, super fine Scotch-Brite pad. So yeah, that's another Duragold or whatever little, that Scotch-Brite pad is actually rated as like a 320 grit. So since I've done so much sanding on this boat and use that guide coat and powder and all this other stuff to make sure we get good adhesion, I go ahead and just pull out the water hose. And once again, Frankie's the one I've seen doing this, and I find it very helpful just to make sure to help you get your surface really prepared. But just coming in there and washing it. And also, he's very particular about always washing the boat with that scouring pad fore and aft, like not to make circles and do all that, because he's saying that'll show up, and I'm gonna trust his word on that. So we wash down the whole boat, and here it is. You know, I go ahead and wipe down the whole surface and all where we're gonna put this finish primer, and then we're gonna roll on a couple of coats. And once again, all I'm trying to do here is, there was a couple little areas, and like in the valley of those where that chine and the hull meets, you know, kind of sanding down in there, kind of got a little too aggressive with the sander or with the block or something, and you know, with the random orbital on top of those strakes, and just kind of got a little burn through. I think maybe I should have sanded a little better. I know I sanded a lot, but I should have sanded a little more with the 120 before I put the finish primer on. So all I'm gonna do here is I'm putting those on, and once again, I made my reference marks. I've got all that laid out. I'm just trying to put a couple more coats of this finish primer on here so that I can come back, because I want to make sure that all of my top coat is put on top of primer. And that's, once again, that's your barrier coat that helps to make sure that you stay watertight or whatnot, and protect your wood and glass and epoxy and all that stuff. So it's just another layer of protection. So that's why we're putting this finish coat on here. Okay, so here we go after putting on that primer, and you can see, hopefully there's enough light, you can see right here is where the texture, where I just put that primer, and right in here is just super smooth. This is from where we sanded last time with the 320. So most of this rake section right here, I'm gonna hand sand. A lot of this is gonna be hand sanding, except for like where I tried to flange up here on the side to make sure that it kind of transitions and all good. But I got a couple little places, and I don't know, like this, where this little piece right here came from. And the only other depression that I found is there is a tiny, you can see it, it is just tiny. It's like the head of a nail. I don't know what caused it. So I'm gonna fill those with fairing compound real quick before I start sanding. That way I can fill it, then that'll dry while I'm sanding in the back or something. But primarily on these strakes back here, I don't know if you can see, you know, maybe you can see the discoloration where I painted around the strakes and did those again, because, you know, they didn't get all the treatment that this hole did with sanding. Fairing, sanding, fairing, sanding, fairing, 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 sanding, 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 fairing, sanding. So I'm gonna go ahead and hand sand those again to try and make sure that I don't burn through these edges. But my goal here is to get rid of all of this orange peel and get it back to smooth, just like this. and then hopefully this will be the last step. Start painting. So I'm gonna start sanding here, and we'll see you later. You can almost see the stuff, this pad here. It's a 320 pad, but it kind of grasps, you can hear it. So works real well. So that gives you an idea of what I find to work real well, of getting in those corners and sanding those streaks, and also along those chines is just a piece of that scouring pad, and wrap a piece of that sandpaper around it. And once again, you can see it a lot here with that. It's like this finish primer it comes off like a powder, and it really wants to clog up your sandpaper. So I just wound up keeping a little stiff bristle brush with me, and I'd brush it off. But also, even doing this hand sanding, you burn through quite a bit of paper doing this. All I'm trying to focus on is just this little corner here, and I get about 1 inch on each side. So then I bring that random orbital back, and I don't have to worry about trying to get in this trough here. So as you'll see, even with all the attention that I put into trying to do this before I took the random orbital out, I still did not get everything to the point where it needed to be, and I wound up coming back. So alright, once again, I've put that guide coat on to make sure that it tells me exactly how much I need to sand, and this time I'm really being cautious to make sure I don't burn through, or I don't do anything like that, as best I can. So well, here we go. As you can see, I didn't record it all just because it was kind of redundant, but I sanded back all of that guide coat here along the chines and back there along the streaks. I got everything prepped, I got everything sanded with 320, everything's done all the way down. Got this bow section here as good as it's gonna be. And so now we're about to let's see, that jug right there, that's top coat blue right there. This is about to happen. So got everything ready. Just washed it down with the hose. Took that scouring pad, scrubbed everything. I actually scrubbed the sides, washed the top of the tent, washed everything, so that hopefully we'll control the dust. It's a little bit cooler right now. There is a little bit of a threat of rain, but I'm gonna try and get this in because I've only got to put 1 coat on. The paint specs call for 1 coat, and then the sand with 400 between each coat. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Andy did a little bit different with this top coat. Andy with Boatworks today did a little bit different. He actually put 2 coats on and then sanded and put his final coat on. So I'm gonna see how this first coat goes on, but I'm thinking about just doing the 1 coat 400 and then doing 3 coats, at least 3 coats. We'll see how it goes on, but that's the plan. I'm about to wipe it all the way down, wipe it down with that wipe down solvent, and then after that I'll get a tack rag. Now we'll run it over with a tack rag a few times, and then we're gonna put this top coat on, at least the first coat, maybe more than that, but at least the first coat. So been a long time getting to here, but I'm ready for it to be done. So we're gonna go ahead and put this top coat on. That's all the time we have for this week, but come back next week and maybe we'll be done.